What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and I'm a little behind the times here, but I want to talk about this kind of massive plot leak that's been going on with regards to Doctor Strange 2. That's still a talking point some week and a half after it was kind of dropped. Now, the big talking point here is the role that Wanda plays in relation to like Shumagorath, America Chavez, Doctor Strange, and even the overall role she plays in the film. So one of the big questions a lot of people have had is, what's Wanda's role in Doctor Strange 2 going to be? Is she going to be the main villain? We largely assume that she is, even with the news dropping that Shumagorath will be in Doctor Strange 2, that a lot of the information out there seems to indicate he'll be a minor villain, right? Something small. That if we were to look at the role Loki plays in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the first Avengers movie, side by side with like the bigger threat of Thanos with regards to the Infinity Gauntlet, that's kind of what we're looking at here, right? That Shumagorath would be like something akin to Loki, kind of the smaller threat, and that the big threat, the main overarching villain behind all this is Wanda. But the big question that we've always kind of had ever since the Shumagorath news was dropped is, what role would Shumagorath have here? Why would he even be in the MCU in the first place? So what this bit of news reveals is that apparently by some form or fashion, Wanda essentially summons Shumagorath. Now, this is kind of the weird thing here, is because Shumagorath is one of these characters, at least from the comics anyway, where he exists out there in the multiverse, right? The main Marvel universe in the comics, and presumably the Marvel Cinematic Universe, if you want to go in that direction, is basically just the next step in what it is that he's trying to conquer, right? So if we looked at it as some kind of like an Earth-based empire, it would be like somebody conquering like Britain and then France and then Russia and so on and so forth, and finally making their way to the States. It's just the next step in the campaign they have to try to conquer everything. Shumagorath rules whole universes in the multiverse, right? Just entire swaths of the multiverse belong to Shumagorath. But in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, it seems to be a wholly different game. Whether Shumagorath is just some kind of demonic entity that exists out there or whatever the case is, it seems to be one of these things where Wanda is trying to attain Shumagorath. Now the question is why? And the linchpin behind all this is the statement Agatha Harkness made to Wanda during WandaVision. So if you guys recall in WandaVision, there's that scene where Agatha has the kids of Wanda, right? Just kind of like little leashes on them, child leashes. And she makes the statement to Wanda that she is the Scarlet Witch, right? She's destined to become that character. The Scarlet Witch is kind of a concept, right? Just this being that's capable of spontaneous creation and is destined to become more powerful than the Sorcerer Supreme. And so if you link these two things together, it's entirely possible that in the MCU, Shumagorath doesn't exist yet. And Shumagorath doesn't exist yet because Wanda has not created Shumagorath. Now, the big question here is, why would Wanda create a being that's capable of traveling the multiverse when Wanda herself is capable of traveling the multiverse? And I think the answer to that question is because Wanda can't do that yet. She hasn't attained that level of power. Now, this goes into the next part of this theory, which is that the post-credit scene of WandaVision takes place 2 years after the end of the series. But we don't know what it is that the Darkhold is entirely capable of. If she was studying it for 2 years and learned how to create life, different things like that, but hadn't quite reached the point where it was explained to her how to travel throughout the multiverse, or if it was something like the Book of Cagliostro, where the ability to travel the multiverse was ripped out of the pages, ripped out of the book itself, then that would simply be information that's not readily available to her. And this could be one of those instances we've talked about before, where Wanda approaches Stephen Strange for the purpose of saying, I need you to help me find my kids in the multiverse, and the response to Stephen Strange is, no, you can't mess with the multiverse that way, which of course then begs the question, why is he doing what he's doing in Spider-Man 2 No Way Home? That's neither here nor there. The important thing here is that if Wanda feels as though she has no other option than to basically use her chaos magic to just kind of create life, but what she has is raw talent without the proper training, she could essentially create Shumagorath and then send Shumagorath into the multiverse for the purpose of tracking down America Chavez. Now, this is the next part of the theory here, which is really, really important, that America Chavez has existed in the MCU for quite some time. She's not going to be someone who just suddenly gained the ability to travel through the multiverse in the beginning of Doctor Strange 2. That instead, what's been happening is she's basically been on the run for her entire life, running from various beings, various individuals out there who were looking to capture her power and use it for their own ends. and that Wanda is basically just the most recent version of a person who's able to do that. That Wanda's looking to find her kids. She ends up creating Shumagorath as a kind of demonic being, or a being that can kind of transition or travel through the multiverse for the purpose of finding America Chavez. And then if the powers of Shumagorath are anything like they are in the comics, then he could basically subdue the will of America Chavez, place her under his control, and then bring America to Wanda. Wanda could in turn take America Chavez's powers just from simple power absorption spells, and then travel through the multiverse to find her kids. What will most likely happen here, if this is the case, and again, this is just a theory, so there's no definitive reason to believe this is an absolute truth, but if this is the case, it would be highly likely that Stephen Strange or Spider-Man or any number of the good guys who are going to be in this film are going to come across America Chavez and save her from Shumagorath, getting in the way of Wanda, the Scarlet Witch. The biggest issue that you have with this, or at least one of the big issues you have with this, is that if Wanda's the main villain of Doctor Strange 2, it wouldn't really make a whole lot of sense for her to basically be stuck and confined to Earth, to the main Marvel Cinematic Universe, and not be able to leave that universe. It makes a lot more sense that she can travel through the multiverse by whatever manner and whatever means, meaning that it's possible she perhaps gets her hands on America Chavez and takes America's powers, or is able to siphon off some level of her power to move on to a higher state. We saw her do that with Agatha Harkness, where she literally took her abilities away, right? Shut down her ability to use her own powers, possibly even absorb them into herself. So we've seen this kind of precedent in the MCU so far. But again, I think that Wanda transitioning into the multiverse and becoming a multiversal threat is a far more effective thing, which really kind of leads us back to the original question: what does Shumagorath have to do with this? And the most likely scenario here is Wanda's just that damn powerful. That Shumagorath is a very powerful being, a very capable being, but Wanda is just that much more powerful than he is. And so the reality is, because Shumagorath is essentially just this being that's looking to track down America Chavez, that perhaps Wanda just seizes control of Shumagorath and he basically serves as her kind of lapdog. But again, why would Wanda need someone to travel the multiverse for her in order to find America Chavez if she could do that herself? And why would she even need America Chavez if she can travel the multiverse? Now, the next big information drop that came to us is basically Professor X in Doctor Strange 2, The Multiverse of Madness. Now, this is not new per se, right? This rumor's been going around for quite some time, but an image that leaked on Twitter recently shows us what Professor X would presumably look like in Doctor Strange 2. Now, the other rumor that kind of goes along with this is the whole Illuminati thing. Those of you guys who don't know what that is, that's basically a group of what are in effect the most powerful members or leaders of superhero groups that exist out there that kind of operate behind the scenes, right? They were originally introduced by Brian Michael Bendis in Marvel Comics and have played some pretty significant roles over the years, more recently with the collapse of the multiverse, which is pretty fitting considering everything going on in Doctor Strange 2. But the important thing is that according to these leaks, this group exists out there in the multiverse. They're not really a multiversal group. They just exist in a universe out there. And that what's going to happen is that somewhere over the course of the film, Doctor Strange is going to stumble across their universe. And because he's someone who's not from that particular Earth, specifically from that particular universe, most likely because they already have their own version of Doctor Strange, he'll be captured and brought before the group, and that's when we'll get the introduction to them. Now, what significance they will have overall in the film is anybody's guess. If I'm a betting man, given the fact that this film does not have like a 5-hour runtime and it's not split into 2 parts, I would say if they do appear, it's gonna be small. It's gonna be a quick momentary thing that'll last maybe 10 minutes at most. And then it's on to the races, back into the whole rigmarole and everything going on with the rest of the movie. Having said that, this is a huge development because the way that it looks like Patrick Stewart. And one of the big things that a lot of people are talking about is that because of the fact that Alfred Molina's Dr. Octopus is the actual Dr. Octopus from the Sam Raimi original Sony Spider-Man movies back in the early 2000s, then it stands to reason this version of Professor X is actually going to be the Patrick Patrick Stewart, Professor X that we're all familiar with from the Fox X-Men line of movies. So this is cool. It's a really, really interesting development. Again, what role it's gonna play, we don't fully know, but it is interesting to see. Having said all that, guys, one thing I do wanna point out, all these leaks, rumors, things like that are all basically coming from the Illuminati. They're coming from Den of Nerds. That's where at least I'm getting a lot of this information from, right? So we'll post links to these guys down in the description. Make sure you guys go check them out, right? I always think it's important to cite our sources here. Thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.